I'm Alex Moore on behalf of That Nerd Show, and we are talking about the short film Florence, here with director Caleb Kuntz, and also producer and screenwriter as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
all right.
Definitely. It's sort of a little bit of everything.
Okay,
yeah. Make it work.
Yeah, really getting those juices flowing with that.
Yes, and the stress. You got to get them all.
Now, the first thing I noticed when I was looking at this film, looking at the title, is I wonder if this is referring to the place or if this is referring to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out it was referring to a person named Florence.
Yeah.
And right away, I found that this was a very relatable story because so many people get misdiagnosed psychologically, if whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so many times they get it wrong.
Yeah.
So right away, I found that interesting. But so what I read about is, is caught up in her own unique perception of the world, misdiagnosed, and so what was the experience of writing this? Where did the inspiration come from?
Oh, where did it come from? Well, I mean, like at the root of it all, it comes from like having brothers who had like ADD, ADHD, and so when we were growing up, like I played the game of school. I realized what I had to do, and then they were a little bit more eccentric in that way. And so I remember specifically, my brother might have been like 10 years old, and I wasn't really aware of what Ritalin or anything like that was. But I remember, like, as he was starting taking it, he was saying things like, "I feel weird," and that's like a very interesting thing. Not necessarily in a good way for like a 10-year-old to be like, I feel weird, to your parents. There's one point where he just felt like he was constantly falling off a building, and my dad took him to the emergency room. But before there, in the parking lot, he kind of like talked us down. It's like you're not falling off the building. This isn't happening. I mean, that's like the tents in Woodstock. When people have bad acid trips and they're like having to sort of get taken down with it. And so that was like my first sort of experience with it. And then I had a friend who committed suicide when I was 20 years old. And he was like jumping through medication and all that, and he was misusing it too, But it's just a very powerful thing that I think is just sort of thrown around. I got my own words with it. My dad had like manic depression, and I feel like I have elements of it. And so there's just always sort of those fears about not being able to control yourself and having to have like some outside source control you.
So, with the story here, what was there like sort of an ending that you were looking for? Is there sort of a moral message that you were hoping to get across from the beginning? Did it change during the course of making this film?
That's a good question. I think the point was always to be just getting people to think about it, or at least like maybe just like opening up the dialogue with it, which is the great thing about like playing festivals, because like people come up and they talk. There's always some people that like come up and they're like, oh my god, I've experienced that exact same thing. And I think it's because it's like a pretty ubiquitous experience these days, especially in the United States. France also has like a really big sort of mental health misdiagnosis problem. But so there's a lot of people that have experienced it, and so I think it's good just to get people to think about it. And then when that dialogue happens, I think I'm really into this idea of like getting people to realize it's not a mental illness, it's just like it is someone who is not quote unquote normal.
Right.
You go back like 500,000 years or something like that, and someone who has schizophrenia is like a prophet. And so it's very, you know what I mean though, but it's like very different. But now we live in this place where we live on top of each other, we have all these big condominiums or apartments, or even just like the idea that we just have so little space because of so many people, and like it's claustrophobic in itself. So if you have some sort of like extrasensorial thing going on, I can only imagine like the sensations. I can only imagine, that someone's telling you, well, that's wrong, and you need to take this to make it better. So it's mainly just opening a dialogue. Endings always sort of change, but the ending for this one actually always sort of stayed the same. So that was it was a first. It's good to have.
That'd be a good sign. So quickly, how was Kyle Seaquest involved? Like when you were doing he was co-writing the screenplay, I believe, right?
Yeah. So like the whole story came like I came up with the story and everything like that, and then Kyle Seaquest and then my wife, Mel Thompson, both helped me with writing it and sort of just getting through the process, just because it's so important to have other people helping out with it. And then he was AD on set because we just worked on films for a really long time. And then me and him both edited it together. So me and him were just sort of like a collaborative duo, and we just sort of really, get off in that sort of way.
As you were talking about, this film kind of had a natural, in terms of the making and the ending didn't change. When you got to the editing part, did you feel like there were a lot of changes, or was it sort of a similar thing where a lot of things just kind of stayed the way it was?
No, completely different. I mean, editing with it, that film, was shot in such a way there's a lot of moments that are just, they are there, and it's exactly what it is. The vomiting of the pills from the counselor's mouth into hers. I mean, that's like a very specific scene that I had sort of had like in my head a long time ago. The white room sequence where the mom is like, she's tied to a bed and they're like force feeding her pills. That was always there. But in terms of like how it started, in terms of like the way that the sequences go, or the way that like we build up the climaxes, a lot of that was created in the editing room. And a big part of that is Kyle. Because Kyle's, I mean, he like works with Terrence Malick and stuff like that. He's just like he has a very poetic way of looking at editing. I feel like I have elements of that, but I mean, it's very much just that collaborative sort of weaving that happened with it.
Awesome, man. Well, this is a film that I think has got an important message, and I hope a lot of people are going to get a chance to see it. And certainly we want to get a chance to see it too. Now, quickly before we go, we have one question that we are asking everybody in these interviews. As we are That Nerd Show, we're focusing on Star Wars and Star Trek a lot lately.
Yeah.
So we're asking everybody. So to ask you this, if you could be involved in any movie, would it be Star Trek or Star Wars, and why?
I guess I would say Star Wars just because I just have more of like an association with it. I have some more of just like an enthralling. You know, ever since you've seen like The New Hope, you know, when you're a kid and you're just like this is like something else. Star Trek is too, but I associate Star Trek more with like the next generation and TV. And while I'm not above TV and I would love to work on TV, the idea of being on one of this very grandiose Star Wars sets, this really speaks to me. Yeah.
Awesome.